Welcome back, Be Better Tribe. This is your host, Julian. Come with excitement today, but also with a heavy heart. This episode is going to be dedicated to my Tio Eloy. He actually passed away recently, and I wanted to make sure that this episode was dedicated to him because it's going to be about him. So the heart of the Be Better Tribe is to slow down, tell stories, talk about inspiring topics, talk about challenges in life, talk about things that have inspired us in any part of our life, whether that's when we were young, in the middle of our life, or when we were older. And this hits home for me, and it hits home on multiple levels. My uncle was somebody that I grew up with, somebody that was there for me, somebody that I spent countless holidays for. Sometimes we had disagreements. Sometimes there was a lot of laughter and fun and excitement. And he's gone. And what really is impacting me so much now is he was going to be one of my first interviews for this podcast. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story of like where we came and how and why this is such an impactful moment. So let's start off with my Tio Eloy and a little bit more about him. So my Tio Eloy and my mom and her other brother Sam, they grew up in New Mexico. Modest family. My grandfather was in the military. He got out of the military and started to become a barber, and my grandma was raising the kids. And they lived in New Mexico for a while, and then they moved from New Mexico to California, and it was modest living. They moved in with an aunt, like a lot of families did when they move states. They lived with my aunt for, I believe, about 6 months. And then they were there just trying to get on their feet. And in those summers, my mom and her brothers would go into the strawberry fields and pick strawberries with their mom while my grandpa was a barber and just trying to get the clientele up and running. And so that was like a story that in perseverance that I never experienced in my life, and they would tell us those stories, and sometimes it never really hit home. But I wanted to make sure that that's where my uncle and my mom and the family came from. Then my uncle did really well in school. He was the ASB president. He had 3 records at Santa Cruz High School where he went for track and field. One of those records lasted 20 years. And he's still top 3 in one of the other runs. I believe it was I don't want to say the wrong track and field event, but he is still in the top 3. I checked not too long ago, which is inspiring. It's awesome. And then after he finished up in high school, he went to law school down in down in San Diego. And then he worked at San Diego for 25 plus years. And so he had an amazing career. He had 2 awesome daughters, my cousins, who I connect with a lot, who are amazing people. And, I resonate with what they're having to go through right now. I couldn't even imagine, but, they're amazing people. And I'm expecting to have I'm expecting to be close with them for the rest of my life. But more about Tio Eloy and why I wanted to interview him. So he was diagnosed with cancer about 6 months ago, and we went down and saw him as a family 3 or so months ago because he was always the one that had us down there. I remember a lot of soccer events where I would be down in San Diego with my family, and we would do a lot of Thanksgiving, and he would always host us at his house. And it's probably one of the reasons, not even thinking about it, why we could actually get down to San Diego and be there, because he opened his doors every time, and he was more than willing to have us there. And so he was very giving in that sense, and always provided such an amazing household. And you would have these awesome events where he would welcome anybody who needed to have that Thanksgiving dinner or needed just a warm cooked meal. And so that was just who he was. And so he was diagnosed, and I didn't have the opportunity to actually do the interview. I was texting my cousin, and we ran out of time. And I think it's a moment and it's a point where if you're listening to this podcast, I've talked to a couple different elements here, and not that this podcast should be morbid by any means. One of the Midway podcasts that I talked about was Midway, where I'm 39, which is statistically halfway through life. But it was reality, and reality and being intentional and talking about things that have happened is important. And I was going to schedule it, and things just kept getting pushed on my end. I didn't focus on getting that interview done. I could have done it and I didn't. And that is what I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. I should have asked them the questions. And so the reason I'm saying it is for all of you who want to do something, go do it. It is, time goes by too quick. You think you have another day and you don't. And so that is just where I want to really make sure that hits home, because again, I was supposed to do it and I didn't, and I delayed, and I thought tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. And it's just one of those things where you have that. I'm hoping that sinks in, because I don't think, at least for me, it doesn't feel good. And it's one of those regrets that you would have where you don't get time back. So that's the first thing. But more of positive and what he meant to me and why I wanted to bring this up and why we're talking about him is because, one, he was successful. And two, he was a very avid reader. And the first sales manager book, I remember when I first became a sales manager, I was down in San Diego visiting family, probably during the holidays. He gave me a sales leader management book, which is still on my bookshelf today, which is always a reminder that he had that knowledge base because he read a ton. So it's really important to continue to develop. And then one of my favorite books, The Last Lecture, that I mentioned previously. It's about a professor from Carnegie Mellon. He had two little kids and he had terminal cancer. And he did this last lecture and he wrote this book so that his kids would have the memory of who he was. And my Tio Eloy was actually reading that book recently while he was going through this. And it brought up a couple different stories. When I was young, my Tio Eloy was a bit of a jokester, and he created these core memories for us as children. One of them was he would always, whenever he visited, he would always take us to the movies. And I think it was just, he would have alone time with us kids. He would take us to a movie of our choice. But he would do this really funny thing where we're kids and he would buy us the tickets, and then all of a sudden he would run and hide in the movie theater. And I don't know why he would do this, but it was like a ruckus, and I would run everywhere and look for him. But it was just one of those core memories where he did it to every one of my cousins. And it was just one of those moments where you think back and that's who he was. He was the jokester. He was the one that would make people laugh. And that was a really fun memory, but I did get him back. And this is a story him and I have talked about a ton. So during one of those movies, I was probably 6 to 7 years old. We're walking down the aisle and there was a big pile of somebody spilled popcorn, and I got on my hands and knees and just started shoveling the popcorn into my mouth. And I embarrassed him. And so, like, I always talked about, I got him back because I embarrassed him at the movies during that time. And it was just a fun story that we would always reminisce on. And, it always put a smile on our face, which was most important. And I appreciated him for that. The second thing is, he was an avid fisherman, and he was a really good fisherman. And his hobby of fishing actually is carried on through my older brother, who is he's a great fisherman as well. He has a YouTube channel, and I just love the connection that they had. And I love that the hobby of fishing will carry on within our family. And I think he'll be really proud of my older brother for picking that up. And the one thing that I remember really young is when we were like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, there was four of us cousins. So it was my older brother, it's me, and then it was his two daughters. I have a little brother, but he was a bit younger, so he wasn't on these trips quite yet. But it was us four. It was him and my grandpa. They would get us up at 5 a.m. We would pack the lunches the night before. We would get our sandwiches ready. We would get all the coolers ready. And then they would get us piled into their truck. We'd all four be there. and then we would go to Loch Lomond and Santa Cruz, and we'd fish all day. It was insane. But it was beautiful because they would always talk about, we're going to catch the big fish. You guys are here. We got to be quiet. And it was just an all day experience where um, you felt safe. You felt um, part of something bigger. And it was it was just these memories where it was just a normal day fishing, but it just meant so much for us. And thinking back, and now as a father, you're looking at those times that you're spending on the boat, and it's insane how like how much chaos for those four little kids on the little boat would be. My grandpa didn't even swim; he would always wear a life jacket, but my uncle had the courage, he had the patience, he had the um, he just he created the space for us to have those times and those memories. And every time we go out to Loch Lomond now, there's a little special place. And before he even passed, we'd go out there and I'd remember those days. And so that legacy will carry on, and that's a moment where I loved. And so the moral of the story is like, be intentional with your time. Aunts, uncles, if you have a nephew or a niece, if you have anyone in your life that's younger that might be looking up to you, know that those days in your life matter, and the time that you spend with them matters, because those memories will never be lost. And I think as we're looking at my Tio Eloy, the questions that I would have asked him would have been advice, would have been after he's looking back in his life, what advice he would have given to me and into his the youth of today. And if he was to look back at what he's accomplished, is there anything he would have done differently? So that was like kind of the stories about the core memories as a child. And as we got older and older, the conversation started to change, and we started to talk about philosophy. We started to talk about um, the Roman Empire. We started to talk about Stoicism, and him and I would spend hours talking about this type of stuff. And it was really deep in terms of the material that we were getting into, because he loved good wine, he made amazing food, and he loved to travel. And that's kind of where I feel like I started to follow his footsteps in my late 20s, early 30s, the Camino de Santiago, going to Italy, talking about all of these different life lessons that I've learned, and the different philosophies that we're gaining on these travels. And so he knew that traveling, and he knew that getting out there was important. And um, I was able to kind of follow his footsteps in that sense of being able to go and travel and see the world. And so that was such a huge impact for me. And I think it unpacked my ability to actually go into experience those things. And whether it was him and I talking about beer fest in Munich, or it was us talking about the Italian region, or us talking about the Amalfi Coast, like I kind of credit some of that the traveling to him, kind of like encouraging me to do that, because he's done it in his past, and he did a lot of that. And so um I'll leave you with this. Time is time catches up to all of us, and if you want to do something, do it. um I think he would want me to not regret having that conversation, and focus on the conversations we did have. And so, for my uncle, I just want to instill all of this with whoever's listening here: is have the conversation when you can. Um, Create those core memories for those individuals that might be younger than you, that you could provide a space for them to have fun, and drink good wine, eat good food, and travel. And he'd always say this one thing. So we're going to end this episode with this: over and out. Thank you.